The sky was burning. Red fire and black smoke rolled together over the broken land, turning everything into a nightmare of light and shadow. Plasma bolts cut across the air like falling stars. The ground shook again and again as explosions tore through the hills. The alien army moved forward in perfect lines, their armor shining cold blue in the smoke. They were known as the Kaelara, strong, fast, ruthless, and proud of never losing. But that day, something strange was happening. Captain Ryan Cole, the last human still standing on that ruined battlefield, refused to fall. His squad was gone, his rifle empty, his armor cracked and smoking. He could taste blood in his mouth, but he did not move back. Every breath hurt, but he still lifted his broken weapon and faced the enemy. Around him, the bodies of both humans and aliens lay silent. But the war had not ended, not yet. Across the battlefield, Kaelara, commander of the Kaelara vanguard, watched the human through her visor. Her claws tightened around her blade. No human had ever lasted this long. The Kaelara had fought humans for years, calling them weak, emotional, fragile creatures. But this one, he didn't know when to quit. End him, Kaelara ordered. 4 Kaelara soldiers ran forward, their energy blades humming. Ryan fired one last shot, the blast striking one in the chest before the weapon sputtered and died. The others charged, cutting through the smoke. Ryan caught one with his fist, another with his shoulder, fighting with raw strength and rage. He took a hit to the side, another to the arm, but he still kept moving. He wasn't fighting to win anymore. He was fighting because humans don't stop. Then Kaelara herself stepped into the smoke. Her armor gleamed like silver fire, her eyes glowing violet. She moved with the grace of a predator, her blade raised. Ryan staggered back, trying to lift his weapon again, but it was too late. The alien's blade pierced through his armor and into his chest. He fell to his knees, gasping, staring up at her. Kaelara stood over him, waiting for the life to fade from his eyes. But it didn't. He coughed, blood on his lips, and smiled. "Why? Don't you die?" Kaelara hissed. Ryan's voice came rough and low. "Bad habit," he said. Something inside her chest twisted. She pulled the blade out and stabbed him again. The sound echoed through the field. He groaned, but still, his eyes stayed open. He even laughed, a dry, broken laugh that sent chills through her army. Kaelara stepped back, confused, angry, but also afraid. The stories were true then. Humans were not like other races. They did not surrender, even to death. Around her, her soldiers looked uneasy. None of them had ever seen a creature like this. The commander of the Kaelara was supposed to be without fear. But when she looked into the human's eyes, so calm, so steady even as he bled, she felt something she had never felt before. He spoke again, softer this time. "You'll have to try harder." Kaelara kicked him down, furious. She wanted to see the light leave his eyes to end the madness. But when he hit the ground, he only smiled again. His hand pressed to his wound, his body shaking from pain. He whispered, "You'll lose one day, not because we're stronger, but because we don't quit." The wind howled across the field, carrying smoke and the smell of burned metal. The other Kaelara didn't move. The human's voice was weak but full of something none of them could name: faith, maybe, or fire. Kaelara raised her blade again, but this time her hand trembled. Something told her not to kill him. Something told her that this human wasn't done yet. "Take him," she ordered finally. "Chain him. He's mine." The soldiers obeyed, dragging Ryan away. He didn't resist. He looked up at the dark alien sky, where the stars blinked faintly through the smoke. His vision blurred, but he smiled again. He didn't know if he would live or die, but as long as he was breathing, the fight wasn't over. And far above, the alien moons turned slowly, shining down on a battlefield that would be remembered forever. The Kaelara had won that day, but deep in their hearts, every soldier knew the truth. they had not truly defeated the human, because something about him, something invisible and unbreakable, had survived, and the legend of the man who refused to die had just begun. The Kaelara fortress was built of black stone and humming energy walls. It stood in the middle of a desert planet where the sun never fully rose, and the wind carried the taste of dust and iron. Inside those walls, prisoners usually didn't last a day. But this human, had already survived 3. Captain Ryan Cole sat in chains inside a cold metal cell. His armor was gone, his wounds still open, but his eyes were alive. Every breath hurt, every muscle burned, but he didn't let the pain own him. He had seen worse on Earth: wars, hunger, loss. This was just another battlefield, only smaller. Outside his cell, Kaelara watched from the observation glass. Her sharp violet eyes studied him like a puzzle. He had no food, no rest, no medicine. Yet every morning, when she came to see him, he was still sitting upright, humming low, human songs she couldn't understand. "Why do you make noise, human?" she asked through the speaker one day. Ryan looked up, half smiling. "It's called music. Helps me think." She frowned. "You think while you rot?" "Better than giving up," he said softly. Her claws tapped the control panel. He was mocking her, yet not in a cruel way. His tone was calm, almost kind. No fear, no begging, no hatred. She didn't understand it. Most species cried when captured. Some begged. Some went mad. But this human behaved as if he was waiting for something. Kaelara called her second-in-command Drath. "Run full scans. I want to know what keeps him alive. Heart, brain, everything." Drath's voice trembled slightly. "Commander, we already did. His vitals are impossible. The wound through his chest should have killed him days ago. It's like his cells refuse to shut down." "Then keep testing," she said sharply. "I want answers." When the guards came with needles and machines, Ryan didn't fight. He only watched them quietly. "You can test all you want," he murmured, "but you won't find what you're looking for." Kaelara's voice came through the speaker again. "And what am I looking for, human?" "The reason I'm still alive," he said, "isn't in my body. It's in my heart." She almost laughed. To her, it sounded like nonsense. The Kaelara didn't believe in emotions. They believed in logic, control, and strength. Feelings were weakness. Yet something about the way he said it made her chest feel tight, like she couldn't breathe right. That night, Kaelara stayed long after the others had left. She watched the human through the glass, sitting in the dark, whispering to himself. He looked broken, yet not defeated. And when she asked her computer to amplify the sound, she heard him whisper, "Hold on, soldier. Just one more day." It was as if he was still fighting a war inside his mind. Days turned to weeks. Kaelara brought him food once, out of curiosity more than mercy. When she entered the cell, he didn't attack. He simply looked at her and said, "Didn't expect dinner service." "Eat," she ordered coldly. He stared at the alien meal, strange glowing meat and purple broth, then nodded. "Not bad," he said, "though my mom's stew was better." "Your mother?" Kaelara repeated, confused. He smiled faintly. "A human who taught me that giving up is worse than dying." She turned away quickly, pretending his words didn't affect her. But they did. She kept hearing his voice even after she left. "Giving up is worse than dying." The phrase played in her head like an echo she couldn't silence. Later, Drath approached her again. "Commander, if we keep him alive, he could become dangerous. His body heals fast. His mind resists sedation. He could escape." Kaelara looked at the monitor showing Ryan's steady heartbeat. "He won't escape," she said quietly. "He wants to be here." Drath blinked. Why would anyone want to be a prisoner? Kaelara didn't answer. But deep down she knew. The human wasn't here to survive. He was here to prove something, to her, to himself, to the universe. One night, she went down again, unable to sleep. The human was awake too, sitting on the floor, whispering words she couldn't understand. She asked, "Do you ever stop fighting, human?" He looked at her through tired eyes. "No, even if I'm chained, I fight inside. For what?" She asked softly. He smiled again. "For the day I'll walk out of here and shake the hand of the one who tried to understand me." Kaelara stood frozen. No prisoner had ever spoken to her like that. There was no hatred, no fear, only strange peace. She felt her chest ache again, something she didn't have a name for. When she walked away that night, she didn't know if she was still his captor or if she was becoming his student, because the human, bleeding and bound, was teaching her something that Kaelara had long forgotten. That strength wasn't about not feeling pain, that it was about standing tall despite it. And Kaelara, the Warborn commander, couldn't stop wondering who was really the prisoner now. Kaelara had fought in wars and she was old enough to lift a blade. She had seen cities burn, ships fall from the sky, and soldiers beg for mercy. Nothing had ever shaken her. Nothing until this human. Captain Ryan Cole had become a mystery she couldn't stop thinking about. Every morning she told herself she would stay away from his cell. Every evening she found herself standing there again, watching him through the glass. He was still weak, still wounded, but his eyes, those strange, bright human eyes, never dimmed. He talked to himself sometimes, whispering names, places, earth, mountains, rivers, oceans. Words that sounded warm, like sunlight and wind. When he spoke of his home, his whole face changed. The fortress was full of machines and silence, but when Ryan spoke, the air felt alive. Kaelara began asking questions. "What is this earth?" She said one evening. Ryan smiled faintly. "It's where I learned to survive. Where every storm teaches you something. Where even when you lose, you don't stop trying again." She frowned. "That sounds inefficient." He laughed softly, the sound strange and human and warm. "Maybe, but it's beautiful too." Kaelara didn't know what beautiful meant, not really. Her people didn't use words like that. They used terms like strategic, productive, or optimal. But when Ryan said beautiful, his tone carried something she could feel in her chest, a spark that made her heart beat faster. She began visiting more often, pretending it was for research. She asked about human biology, their emotions, their stories. Ryan answered patiently, even when she teased him. He told her about a planet full of colors, about people who cried, laughed, sang, and fought for reasons that made no logical sense. "Why risk your life for others?" she asked one day. "Because sometimes," Ryan said, looking straight at her, "you can't live with yourself if you don't." Those words stayed in her mind long after she left. Later that night, she stood in her private chamber, staring at her reflection. The violet glow of her eyes seemed colder now. "Why risk your life for others?" she repeated to herself quietly. "Because sometimes." She stopped, unable to finish. Her chest hurt again, the same strange feeling she had when she was near him. Her assistant, Drath, noticed her distraction. "Commander," he said carefully, "you spend too much time with the prisoner. The High Council will question your judgment." Kaelara's voice turned sharp. "The High Council does not command my curiosity." "Curiosity leads to weakness," Drath warned. "Then maybe weakness is not what we think it is," she said quietly. Turning away, the next day she entered Ryan's cell without armor. The guards protested, but she silenced them with a glance. Ryan looked up, surprised. "No fancy armor today?" he said lightly. She shrugged. "I want to know what makes you so sure you're alive." He chuckled. "Because I still care." She tilted her head. "Care? About others. About the world. Even when it hurts." You make it sound like pain is something to treasure. He nodded. Maybe it is. Pain reminds us we can still feel. It reminds us we're not machines. Her throat tightened. She had always been proud of being like a machine, cold, precise, emotionless. But when he said that, she realized how empty her victories had been. She had conquered planets, yet she had never felt anything real. Days passed, and rumors spread among the soldiers. The commander was spending too much time with the human. Some whispered she was losing her edge. Some whispered worse, that she was changing. One afternoon, Ryan asked her a question instead. Do you ever wonder what it's like to lose? Kaelara frowned. We don't lose. That's not what I asked. She hesitated. No, I've never wondered. He smiled sadly. Then you've never truly lived. The words hit harder than any blade. For the first time, Kaelara didn't have an answer. She walked out of the cell, her mind spinning. That night, she stood alone on the fortress balcony, watching the twin moons. The wind brushed her face, cold and endless. Somewhere deep inside, she realized she no longer looked at the human as an enemy. He was something else, something dangerous. Not because of his strength, but because of the truth he carried. She began questioning everything. Why did her people fight? Why did they conquer? Why did she obey? And then came the dream. She saw herself standing on Earth, a world full of color and sound. She saw Ryan smiling, alive and free, reaching his hand toward her. When she woke up, her heart was racing. The next morning, she went to his cell again, but this time, she didn't stand outside the glass. She stepped inside. The guards gasped, but she ignored them. Ryan looked up. You look different, he said softly. Maybe I am, she replied. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the soldier and the alien commander. Two enemies divided by war, but drawn together by something neither of them could name. And deep down, Kaelara knew that whatever was happening to her, it was something her people would call betrayal. But to her, it finally felt like being alive. The fortress that once felt untouchable trembled that night. Lightning cracked across the dark sky, and a storm of plasma fire lit up the horizon. The alarmed sirens began to howl, a sound Kaelara had never heard before in her own command post. She turned sharply as the red warning lights filled the corridor, flashing across metal walls. Commander! Drath burst into the room, panic on his face. We're under attack. Unknown ships have broken through orbit. They're not Kaelari, they're raiders. Kaelara's blood ran cold. Raiders, mercenaries who killed for sport, who sold prisoners for parts. They had come for the fortress's most valuable prize, the human. Seal the lower levels, she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. Activate defense grids. The command center shook again as another explosion hit. The fortress was collapsing piece by piece. Kaelara grabbed her blade and sprinted through the smoke-filled halls. Soldiers ran past her, shouting, bleeding, dying. But through all the chaos, one thought burned in her mind: Ryan Cole. He was still in his cell. She reached the lower level, just as the walls cracked open from the blast. Fire burst from the ceiling. The power flickered, and the cell locks began to fail. Kaelara ran through the heat and debris until she reached the human's chamber. Ryan was already awake. The cell door had short-circuited and was hanging half open. He stood there, swaying slightly, still weak but alert. His eyes found hers through the smoke. Guess your base isn't as safe as you thought, he said, a faint smile forming even in the chaos. Kaelara ignored his tone. They're here for you, she said quickly. The raiders, they'll tear you apart for your DNA. He tilted his head. Then I'd better not get caught. She hesitated only a moment before tossing him a fallen guard's weapon. Can you fight? Ryan checked the charge, then grinned. I was born to. The two of them moved together through the flaming corridors. The fortress groaned around them, metal twisting and falling as explosions ripped through the structure. Kaelara led the way, her blade glowing in the dark, while Ryan fired short bursts of plasma fire with deadly aim despite his injuries. When they reached the central stairway, a squad of raiders appeared, creatures with jagged armor and red visors. Kaelara leaped into them with a war cry, her blade slicing through the first two. The others fired, but Ryan stepped forward, using fallen debris as cover, returning fire with a calm precision that shocked even her. "You're insane," she muttered as they caught their breath. He smirked, wiping sweat and blood from his brow. "That's what they tell us back home." As they pressed forward, Kaelara noticed something strange. Her soldiers, those who had feared Ryan before, were now fighting beside him. They took orders from him without hesitation, drawn to the strange strength in his voice. He didn't bark commands. He encouraged. He inspired. "Cover left flank. Hold the line. We don't run, we survive." The fortress, once a place of control and silence, was now alive with the sound of human determination. But then came another blast stronger than before. The floor beneath them cracked open. Kaelara fell, catching the edge at the last second. She dangled over a pit of fire. Her grip slipped. "Kaelara!" Ryan shouted, dropping his weapon. Without thinking, he dove forward, grabbing her hand. The weight nearly pulled them both down. Smoke filled the air, burning his lungs, but he refused to let go. Why would you save me?" she gasped, coughing. He tightened his grip. "Because that's what humans do." With one final heave, he pulled her back up. They collapsed together on the floor, coughing, exhausted. She stared at him, disbelief and something deeper in her eyes. He smiled weakly. "Told you. Bad habit." Before she could respond, a roar echoed through the hall. A massive raider, twice their size, stepped through the fire, swinging a plasma axe. Ryan shoved her aside as the weapon came down, blocking the blow with a broken shield. Sparks flew. The impact sent him sprawling, but he rolled to his feet and fired again. Kaelara jumped in, her blade cutting deep into the creature's armor. Together, they brought it down. When the fortress finally went silent, both of them stood surrounded by ruins. Smoke curled from the walls, the alarms fading one by one. Outside, the storm had cleared, and the twin moons hung in silence. Kaelara turned to Ryan, her voice quiet. "You could have escaped. You could have left me to die." He looked at her, tired but steady. "Didn't seem right." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a commander talking to a prisoner. She felt like an equal. That night, as the wounded were treated and fires burned low, Kaelara stood at the balcony and watched the human bandage his arm. He looked fragile, yet unstoppable. The air was thick with smoke and silence after the battle. The fortress lay in ruins, its towers broken, its walls scorched black. Only a few sections still stood, flickering with weak blue power lights. The scent of burning metal hung heavy in the air. Kaelara moved through the rubble, her armor dented, her once perfect stride now uneven. Her people were rebuilding what they could, dragging survivors from the wreckage. But her eyes were searching for only one person. Ryan. She found him near the collapsed courtyard, sitting on a pile of shattered stone, his body slumped, breathing ragged. His arm was bleeding again, and part of his armor had melted into his skin. Still, when she approached, he grinned faintly. "You look terrible," he rasped. Kaelara folded her arms. "You're bleeding out, and I look terrible?" He chuckled weakly. "Guess we both had a rough night." She knelt beside him, scanning his wounds with her wrist device. "You need medical attention." "Your organs are," he waved her off. "Already been through worse." "You can't survive this," she said, her voice firm but softer than before. "Not even you." Ryan looked up at her, eyes half-lidded but full of calm. "You said that the first time you stabbed me. Remember how that turned out?" Her throat tightened. She remembered it too well, the first moment she tried to kill him. How he smiled through the pain and said, "Bad habit." That same calmness was there now, though his face was pale and his breath shallow. Kaelara clenched her fists. "Why do you always laugh when you should scream?" He smiled faintly. "Because it scares death a little." Before she could respond, a distant explosion shook the ground again. A second raider wave had landed, not as many as before, but enough to finish what they started. The walls rumbled, lights flickered, and the distant roar of engines filled the night air. Kaelara looked toward the sound, then back at Ryan. "You can't fight. You stay here." He shook his head. "Not happening." "Ryan," he struggled to stand, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. "If they're coming for us again, I'm not sitting out the last round." Before she could stop him, he staggered forward, grabbing a fallen plasma rifle. He loaded the weapon with shaking hands, then gave her that same stubborn grin that made her chest ache. "Let's finish this," he said. They fought side by side once more, through fire and dust. Kaelara's blade flashed bright in the smoke, while Ryan covered her with steady bursts of fire. His body moved slower now, his legs trembling. But his aim was still deadly. Then came the moment that froze her blood. A raider captain massive, armored like a walking tank, charged from the smoke, swinging a plasma blade the size of a spear. Kaelara turned too late. The blade came straight for her heart, and Ryan stepped in front of it. The energy blade plunged through his chest, deep and burning. Time stopped. Kaelara screamed, her voice raw and full of something she'd never felt before. Rage, fear, grief all mixed into one unbearable sound. She caught him as he fell, her hands covered in his blood. His face was pale, but he still smiled weakly, like he was comforting her. "Why don't you die, human?" She cried, tears she didn't understand spilling down her cheeks. "Why won't you just stop?" He coughed, blood running down his chin, and whispered the same words that had started it all. "Bad habit." She pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay awake, Ryan." "That's an order." He chuckled softly. "Since when do I take orders?" "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't leave me." He looked at her for a long moment, his hand trembling as he reached up and touched her face. "Then don't let me go," he said quietly. For a few seconds, everything went still. The battlefield noise faded. All Kaelara could hear was his uneven breathing and the echo of her own heartbeat. She didn't care about war, honor, or duty anymore, only about the strange, stubborn human who refused to die. She carried him to the med chamber herself. The healers protested, but one look from her silenced them. For hours they worked, stitching, sealing, regenerating cells. It shouldn't have been possible. His heart had stopped twice. His lungs were burned. But somehow, he held on. When the machines finally steadied, Kaelara sat beside him, her armor gone, her hands trembling. She looked at him, the human who had changed her world, and whispered, "You were supposed to be my prisoner. Now I'm the one who can't escape." Ryan's eyes flickered open, just for a moment. "Told you," he whispered weakly. "We're hard to get rid of." Kaelara let out a shaky laugh, half tears, half relief. Outside, the fortress burned again, but inside, in that small chamber, something even stronger had begun to rise. Not fire, not fury, but something much more dangerous for both their kinds. Hope. When the twin suns rose over the desert planet, the light fell upon ruins and silence. Smoke curled into the pale sky, carrying the scent of victory and loss. The Kaelara fortress, once a symbol of dominance, now looked more like a grave. But among the ashes, something unexpected was born, a story. They whispered it in the med bays, in the soldier barracks, in the transmission lines reaching the outer worlds. the human lived. Ryan Cole. The man who had taken a blade through the heart, still breathed. His name spread through alien cum channels like wildfire. Some said it was impossible. Some said he was a god. Others swore he was a demon wearing human skin. But Kaelara knew the truth. He was neither. He was just human. Inside the recovery chamber, Ryan slept in silence, surrounded by soft blue lights and humming machines. His wounds were deep, but somehow his heart refused to quit. Every time his vitals dipped, he fought his way back, dragging his body toward life again and again. Kaelara stayed beside him. Days turned into nights, nights into cycles. She barely ate, barely slept. Her officers didn't understand. "Commander," Drath warned, "the Council demands your report. You can't keep protecting him." She didn't even look up. "If they want him, they'll have to come through me." Drath hesitated. "You're risking everything. Your rank, your name, your honor." Kaelara's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Honor means nothing if you've forgotten mercy." That single sentence spread faster than any order she had ever given. For the first time in Kaelari history, soldiers began questioning their war. They talked about the human's courage, his laughter in pain, his refusal to die. Even those who once hated him started to feel something strange respect. When Ryan finally opened his eyes, Kaelara was there. He blinked at the bright light, his voice rough. "Still here?" She smiled softly. "You're hard to kill." He laughed, weak but real. "You're one to talk. I thought you'd given up on me." "Giving up," she said quietly, "isn't a habit I learned from you." Ryan tried to sit up, wincing. "How long was I out?" "6 days," she said. 6 long, stubborn days. He exhaled slowly, eyes wandering toward the open window where the desert winds carried sand like golden smoke. "So, who won?" Kaelara looked away for a moment. "No one." "Maybe that's the point." He gave a faint smile. "Then maybe it's time someone stopped fighting." Her eyes softened. "You really think peace is possible between our species?" He shrugged. "Peace always sounds impossible until someone tries." That same night, Kaelara broadcast a message across the Kaelari networks. It was short, calm, and unlike anything she had ever said before. "We captured a human soldier. We studied him. We broke him. He survived. We called him a monster. But maybe we are the ones who forgot how to live." The transmission echoed across half the galaxy. Some called her a traitor. Some called her brave. Others began to believe. The name Ryan Cole became a symbol not of fear, but of endurance. Soon, alien traders carried the story to other systems. They told it in bars, in war zones, on mining ships drifting between stars. They spoke of the undying human and the alien commander who spared him. And for the first time in years, the word hope was spoken again. Ryan didn't care for the fame. He hated being called a legend. One evening, as Kaelara helped him walk outside for the first time since the attack, he looked at the horizon and said, "They make it sound bigger than it was." Kaelara glanced at him. "You were dying. You saved my people. You changed everything." He chuckled softly. "No, I just refuse to stay dead." She smiled faintly. "That's enough to change everything." They stood in silence as the twin suns sank low, painting the desert in gold and crimson. For a long moment, neither of them felt like a soldier anymore. Just two beings who had seen too much, lost too much, and still chose to stand. But peace never comes easy. A transmission came through the fortress comes that night, an urgent one from the Kaelari High Council. Kaelara read the message in silence, her eyes hardening. "They're sending an army," she whispered. "They think you've corrupted me. They want you dead. And me too." Ryan gave a tired smile. Guess legends always get someone's attention. She turned toward him, her expression fierce. Then let's remind them what a human legend really looks like. Outside, thunder rolled again as ships began to descend in the distance. The peace they dreamed of would have to wait. The war had found them once more, and this time it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about proving that even in a universe of endless darkness, one human's light could ignite a revolution. The night before the coming storm, the desert was silent. The fortress ruins glowed faintly under the twin moons, and the cold wind moved across the broken towers like a whisper of ghosts. Kaelara stood on the high balcony, her blade resting against the railing, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She could already see the faint blue lights of the approaching Kaelari fleet. Her own people were coming to destroy her and to finish what the war had started. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Ryan Cole walked slowly into the light, still weak, his chest bound with fresh bandages. Every step looked painful, but his face carried that same familiar smile, the one she had come to trust. "They're here," she said quietly. "Yeah," he answered, looking toward the rising glow in the distance. "Your people don't waste time." Kaelara's voice softened. "They think I've betrayed them, that I've fallen under your influence." Ryan chuckled, the sound tired but warm. "Funny, my people used to say the same thing. Anyone who tried to make peace must be brainwashed." She turned to him. "What are you thinking?" He looked at the approaching ships for a long time before answering. "That maybe it's time to show them what real strength looks like." When the first blast shook the ground, Kaelara's soldiers rushed to defensive positions. Many were afraid, but none ran. Something had changed in them since the human came. They didn't fight out of duty anymore. They fought for something larger, something they couldn't even name. Kaelara moved to the command post. "Activate the shields," she ordered. The fortress hummed with power, but the enemy fleet filled the sky, hundreds of warships cutting through the clouds. The comms buzzed with a voice, a cold, sharp tone. "Commander Kaelara, surrender the human and yourself. You are charged with treason." Kaelara pressed the communicator. "No," she said simply. "I'm charged with remembering what it means to live." The reply came instantly. "Then you will die with him." Ryan stood beside her, tightening the straps on his armor. "They always say that," he muttered. She glanced at him. "You're in no condition to fight." He gave her a crooked grin. "You keep saying that, and I keep proving you wrong." The first wave hit the shields like thunder. Energy blasts painted the sky red and gold. Kaelara's forces returned fire, their cannons glowing blue, but the enemy numbers were overwhelming. Whole sections of the fortress began to crumble again. Through the smoke, Ryan grabbed a fallen rifle and ran to the wall. He moved like a ghost through the fire, directing soldiers, pulling the wounded to safety. Every time he should have collapsed, he forced himself to keep moving. Kaelara saw him from above, shouting orders with a voice that carried over the explosions. Even her soldiers listened to him, now an alien army. Obeying the human dot, she joined him on the wall, slicing through attackers with her glowing blade. "You're insane," she said over the roar of battle. He laughed breathlessly. "You keep saying that too." Then came the second fleet. The sky darkened completely as more ships descended, blotting out the stars. The ground trembled. Kaelara looked around. Half her troops were gone, the shields failing. Ryan's breathing grew heavy, blood seeping through his bandages. Yet when she turned to him, he just smiled. "If this is it, we make it count." "Ryan," he placed a hand on her shoulder. "No fear. Not now. They need to see it." Kaelara looked into his eyes and saw something terrifying and beautiful, the same fire that had refused to die since the day they met, when the final assault began. Ryan climbed to the highest wall, his figure outlined against the burning sky. He lifted a damaged human flag from the ruins and planted it in the ground. The wind caught it, and the tattered cloth began to wave over the chaos. The alien soldiers stopped fighting for a second, staring. Even the attackers hesitated. It wasn't the flag that froze them, it was the sight of him, broken and bleeding, still standing tall. Kaelara joined him, raising her blade beside the flag. "For life," she shouted, her voice echoing through the valley. Ryan's reply was soft but carried like thunder. "For hope." Together, they charged. The fortress erupted in light. When the dust cleared hours later, the battlefield was silent again. The attacking fleets were gone, retreated, or destroyed. Only smoke and silence remained. Kaelara staggered through the ruins, her armor scorched, her body shaking. "Ryan!" she called, her voice trembling. She found him near the fallen flag, slumped against the wall. He was smiling, even as blood stained the sand. "You did it," she whispered. Kneeling beside him, he looked up at her, his eyes bright in the pale dawn. "No," he said softly. "We did." His breathing slowed. She pressed his hand to her chest, tears running down her face. "Please, not again." He smiled one last time. "Told you. It's a bad habit." His eyes closed, but even as his body fell still, the wind carried his words across the burning desert. Soldiers, Kaelari and human alike, stood in silence, looking at the flag and the woman who knelt beside him. The war ended that day. Not because of victory, but because of what he left behind. The undying human became more than a story. He became a promise that even in a galaxy filled with hate, one soul could light a fire strong enough to outshine death itself. And as the twin suns rose over the quiet battlefield, Kaelara whispered to the wind, "You never died. Ryan, you just became part of every one of us."